In a faraway galaxy, there was a great empire ruled by King Velection. His palace, built on a high hill, shone like a jewel among the stars. The walls of the palace were decorated with bright colors and strange symbols that told the story of a long and proud history. In every hall and courtyard, the spirit of ancient tradition mixed with new ideas to create a place of wonder and strength. King Velection was known for his firm but fair rule. He cared deeply for his people and for the customs that had been passed down through many generations. The king believed that order and respect for the past were the keys to a bright future. His strong presence reminded everyone in the empire of the courage and wisdom that had shaped their world. Within the palace lived many princesses, the beloved daughters of King Velection. Each princess was unique. Some were gentle and kind, while others were brave and curious. They learned about the kingdom's history, its legends, and its many rules. Every day, the princesses walked through the palace gardens, where unusual flowers bloomed in vivid colors under the light of distant suns. In their graceful movements and quiet smiles, there was a hint of hidden dreams and secret wishes. Even though the princesses lived a life of beauty and comfort, each of them wondered about life beyond the palace walls. Late at night, when the stars shined their gentle light through tall windows, a few of them would gather in small, quiet rooms to share their thoughts. They talked about the wide world beyond their home, a world full of adventures and unknown challenges. Their hearts beat with hope, and they dreamed of a future that was free from the strict rules of the past. Every day in the empire was filled with small moments of joy and unity. Servants moved quickly through the long corridors, and the soft hum of advanced machines mixed with the sound of gentle music. In the grand dining hall, long tables were set for meals where everyone, from the highest noble to the lowest servant, shared in the feast of life. The beauty of the palace and the strength of its people were a living tapestry that honored the past while looking ahead to what might come. But even in this peaceful place, the winds of change began to stir. In quiet corners of the palace, the princesses exchanged secret glances and whispered of new ideas. Their soft voices carried thoughts of a life where they could choose their own path instead of following old rules without question. Although the empire celebrated its long traditions, a small seed of rebellion was being planted in the hearts of those who wished for freedom and a new future. Thus, the stage was set in this magnificent empire. The past and the future met in the halls of King Velection's palace, where ancient customs were slowly giving way to the promise of change. In the mix of beauty, order, and hidden dreams, a new story was about to begin, one that would test the bonds of tradition and light a spark of hope for a different tomorrow. The morning sun rose over the palace, and a tense mood filled the great hall. King Velection stood on a high dais, his eyes scanning the gathered crowd. Courtiers, soldiers, and visitors from many worlds had come to hear his words. The princesses, dressed in their finest robes, stood in a row, their faces showing a mix of pride and worry. King Velection cleared his throat. His voice, deep and steady, echoed around the hall. "Today, I bring forth a new decree," he announced. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone waited to hear what the king would say next. He continued, "I have watched our empire grow strong with tradition and honor, but now we must also grow in strength by reaching beyond our known borders." The king's words carried a weight that made the hearts of many beat faster. To forge a future that embraces all the stars, I have decided that each of my princesses will be married to one man, a human from a faraway land. A murmur spread through the crowd. The idea of a human, a being from another world, standing among their own was strange to them. Some whispered in shock, while others stared in disbelief. The princesses looked at each other with a mix of fear and anger. For generations, they had been raised to marry within the empire, to keep the traditions alive. Now, everything was changing. The king's voice grew firmer as he explained his reasons. "Humans have shown great resilience and ingenuity in their own lands," he said. "They have faced hardship with courage and built wonders from their dreams. I believe that a union with a human will bring fresh strength to our empire and open our eyes to new ways of thinking." Not everyone in the hall felt the king's words. Some advisors exchanged uneasy glances, and a few nobles shook their heads in silent protest. The princesses, too, had different feelings about the decree. Some felt curious about this unknown human and what he might bring to their world. Others, however, felt that their freedom was being taken away by a command they did not choose. As the king finished his speech, the hall erupted into confused chatter. The royal guard stood at attention, and the princesses tried to hide their troubled faces behind polite smiles. Many felt that the king's decision was bold, but risky. The union would not only change their lives, but also the way the empire saw itself. In the days that followed, the palace buzzed with rumors and secret meetings. The princesses began to discuss the new decree in hushed tones. Some planned to obey, hoping to see the good in this change. Others whispered of defiance, dreaming of a future where they could choose their own partners and decide their own destinies. Thus, the edict was unleashed, a decree that promised a future of change, but also stirred the hearts of those who cherished the old ways. The stage was set for a dramatic transformation in the great empire, where ancient traditions would soon clash with new ideas brought by a mysterious human. Marcus Kane was a simple man from Earth, a planet where life was tough, but filled with hope. He was known among his people for his strength, kindness, and the ability to solve problems even in hard times. When news reached him that King Velection of a distant alien empire had chosen him to be the husband for his princesses, Marcus felt a mix of surprise and determination. Marcus had never dreamed of leaving his home, but he understood that this was a chance to bring something new to both worlds. With a brave heart, he boarded a fast spaceship and set off into the deep dark of space. The journey was long, and during the trip, Marcus thought often of the people he left behind. He remembered the struggles on Earth, the challenges that taught him to fight for a better life. These thoughts made him even more determined to show that a simple human could offer hope and strength in a world so different from his own. When Marcus finally arrived at the alien palace, he was struck by its grand beauty. The palace was enormous and brightly lit, with walls covered in strange symbols and glowing designs. The air was filled with a gentle hum of advanced machines and soft music that echoed through the halls. Although everything was new and unfamiliar, Marcus walked calmly, with a steady step that showed his inner resolve. Inside the palace, many eyes turned to him. The princesses, who had grown up in a world of long-held traditions, watched him with both curiosity and concern. Their faces showed surprise at seeing the human in their midst. Some princesses saw in Marcus a brave spirit, a man who could bridge the gap between the old ways of the empire and the new ideas of Earth. Others felt unsure and anxious, worrying that his human nature might not fit with the customs they had always known. Marcus spoke in a soft, clear voice, choosing words that were simple yet honest. He thanked King Velection for the honor, and he promised to do his best to understand the alien ways while also sharing a little of his own world. He told the princesses that, although he was far from home, his heart was open to learning from them. Marcus believed that every person, whether human or alien, deserved the right to choose their own path and be treated with respect. As he continued to speak, a spark of hope grew among the princesses. They saw that Marcus was not just a stranger but a symbol of change, someone who might help unite their world with another. His genuine words and calm presence offered them the promise of a future where old traditions could blend with new ideas, creating a better life for everyone. In that moment, the great hall filled with a quiet energy. The arrival of Marcus Kane, the humble human candidate, had set in motion a series of events that might change the destiny of the alien empire. His simple presence brought a challenge to the old ways and a new hope that the future could be brighter for both his people and the princesses of King Velection's realm. The great hall fell silent as Marcus Kane stood before the royal court. His arrival had stirred the empire, but none were more affected than the princesses themselves. They had spent their entire lives surrounded by tradition, raised with the belief that their futures were already decided for them. Now, the presence of a human, chosen by their father as their husband, challenged everything they knew. Each princess reacted differently. Princess Ariella, the eldest, stood tall with her arms crossed. Her emerald green eyes were sharp, filled with defiance. She was a warrior, trained in battle, and she did not believe that a foreigner, especially a human, could ever be worthy of a royal marriage. To her, this was an insult. She clenched her fists, silently vowing that she would never accept this fate. Princess Lyra, the scholar, watched Marcus with quiet curiosity. Unlike Ariella, she was not quick to judge. She had spent years studying the stars, learning about different species and cultures. Humans were an interesting race. Survivors, builders, dreamers. She wondered what it would be like to speak with one, to understand the way he thought. But even with her curiosity, she was unsure if she could truly accept him as a husband. Princess Seraphina, the kindest among them, felt a strange warmth in her heart. She saw something in Marcus's eyes that made her believe he was not here to control them, but to bring something new, something different. Perhaps he did not choose this fate either, just as they had not. A quiet hope flickered in her heart. Princess Valora, the most ambitious, felt anger rise within her. She had always dreamed of ruling alone, of shaping the empire as she saw fit. She did not need a husband, especially not a human one. If the king thought she would obey without a fight, he was mistaken. As the court session ended, the princesses returned to their chambers, their minds filled with thoughts of rebellion, curiosity, or uncertainty. That night, in the shadows of the palace, secret discussions began. Ariella gathered her closest sisters, her voice low but firm. "We cannot accept this," she declared. "We have trained our whole lives to serve our empire, to make choices for ourselves. Now, father wishes to force us into this. No, we must find a way to stop this." Lyra, though hesitant, offered a different thought. "And what if Marcus is not like the others? What if he does not wish to rule over us, but to stand beside us?" Seraphina looked down, thinking deeply. Maybe we should speak to him first before deciding." Valora scoffed. "Speak to him. He is a human. He does not belong here. If we must defy father's decree, we must act soon." And so, while the king rested, unaware of the storm building beneath his own roof, the princesses whispered among themselves, deciding whether to resist, accept, or change the course of their own fate. The halls of the grand palace were no longer peaceful. Whispers filled the corridors, and shadows moved in secret. The king's decree had shaken the royal court, and everyone had an opinion about it. Some believed the king's decision was wise, a step toward a stronger empire. Others saw it as a dangerous mistake. But no one was more divided than the princesses themselves. Ariella, Lyra, Seraphina, and Valora had spent the night in deep discussion. They could not agree on what to do. Ariella and Valora were determined to resist, while Lyra wanted to understand Marcus, and Seraphina still held on to hope that things could turn out well. Meanwhile, in the royal court, powerful nobles and advisors gathered in secret chambers, speaking in hushed voices. "This is madness," one noble muttered, pacing the floor. "A human. A species so weak and short-lived. How can a creature like that be fit to marry into the royal bloodline?" "Perhaps the king sees something we do not," another whispered. "Humans have survived against impossible odds. They are resourceful, unpredictable." One of the older advisors shook his head. "Or perhaps the king is losing his mind. If the princesses accept this, then what next? Will we allow humans to govern our people, to lead our armies?" In another part of the palace, the royal guards murmured among themselves. Their loyalty was to the king, but even they had doubts. "I hear some of the princesses do not support this," one guard whispered. "Of course they don't," another replied. "Would you accept being forced into marriage with an outsider?" "We follow orders," the first guard said, though his voice held uncertainty. The tension in the palace grew with every passing hour. Marcus, unaware of the full extent of the unrest, found himself walking through the grand hallways, observing the strange beauty of the alien world he had entered. He noticed the way some people stared at him with curiosity, while others looked at him with suspicion, or even anger. He understood why. He was an outsider, a human in a world where he did not belong. He had not asked for this, yet here he was. As he walked, he heard a soft voice call out, "You are the human." He turned and saw Princess Seraphina standing a few feet away. She looked at him with wide, searching eyes. "Yes," Marcus replied simply. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Do you want this?" she asked. "To be here, to marry us." Marcus sighed. "I didn't choose this, but I also don't believe in forcing anyone to do something they don't want. Not you, not me." Seraphina studied his face. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps this human was not an enemy, but an ally. Meanwhile, in the dark corners of the palace, the seeds of rebellion were being planted. Plans were being made. Some would do anything to stop this marriage, even if it meant war. The palace was no longer the peaceful place it had once been. Whispers of rebellion moved through the grand halls like a silent storm. Some princesses were willing to accept the king's decree, but others were determined to fight it. In the shadows, a secret plan was forming. Princess Ariella, the strongest among them, had gathered a group of her sisters in a hidden chamber deep within the palace. The air was thick with tension as they sat around a glowing crystal table, their expressions filled with determination. "This is not just about marriage," Ariella said firmly. "This is about our freedom. If we allow this, we will no longer have a choice in our own futures." Princess Velora nodded in agreement. "Our father believes this human will make our empire stronger. But what if he is wrong? What if this is the beginning of our downfall?" Some of the princesses hesitated. Lyara, the scholar, tapped her fingers on the table. "I understand your fear," she said softly. "But Marcus is not the enemy. He does not want to control us. I have spoken to him." Ariella's eyes narrowed. "Then what does he want?" "He wants the same thing we do," Lyra answered. "The right to choose." Seraphina, the kindest of them, finally spoke. "Maybe there is another way. Maybe we do not need to fight." But Ariella shook her head. "We cannot risk it. We must act before it is too late." That night, the rebellion began. In secret, Ariella and Velora met with powerful nobles who opposed the king's decision. They made plans to delay the marriage, to weaken the king's hold on the empire. Some whispered of overthrowing him completely, but Ariella refused. She still loved her father, even if she did not agree with him. She only wanted him to see reason. Meanwhile, Seraphina struggled with doubt. She did not want to betray her sisters, but she also did not want war. She found herself walking through the palace gardens, lost in thought. That was when she saw Marcus again. He was sitting beneath a strange, glowing tree, looking up at the alien sky. "You look troubled," he said without turning. Seraphina hesitated, then sat beside him. "My sisters are planning something," she admitted. "They will not accept this marriage. Some want to stop it by force." Marcus sighed. "I figured as much." Seraphina looked at him, surprised. "You're not angry?" Marcus shook his head. "No, if I were in their place, I would feel the same way." He paused. "I don't want to force anything. I just want to understand. Maybe we can find another way." For the first time, Seraphina felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, this human was not the enemy. Maybe he was the answer. But deep in the palace, Ariella and Velora prepared for the moment they would strike. The rebellion had begun, and there was no turning back. The air in the palace grew heavy with tension. Whispers of rebellion had reached King Velexion's ears, and he could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. His daughters were divided, some willing to accept his decree, others preparing to defy him. The court was restless, the nobles uncertain, and even his most loyal advisors began to question whether he had made the right choice. Seated on his grand throne, the king gazed at the flickering flames of the ceremonial torches that lined the great hall. His mind drifted to memories of his youth, of the wars that shaped him, of the sacrifices he had made to build a strong empire. He had always ruled with wisdom, but had he now made a mistake? A trusted advisor, Lord Vexor, approached him with a respectful bow. "My king, there are troubling rumors," he said in a low voice. "Some of the princesses, led by Ariella and Vailora, are gathering support. They do not wish to accept the marriage to the human." King Velexian sighed, rubbing his temples. "I expected resistance," he admitted, "but I had hoped they would see reason." Lord Vexor hesitated before speaking again. "Your daughters are strong-willed, just like their father. They do not want to be controlled. They want freedom." The king's grip tightened on the armrest of his throne. "Do they not see? This is not about control. This is about the future of our empire. Humans are unpredictable, resourceful, and determined. If we do not learn from them, we will fall behind. We must evolve, or we will perish." Lord Vexor nodded. "Perhaps, but have you considered that forcing them into this marriage may weaken the very bond you are trying to strengthen?" The king remained silent. He had ruled with strength for so long, but now his own family questioned him. Had he miscalculated? Meanwhile, in the quiet corners of the palace, Marcus found himself thinking deeply about his place in this empire. He had never wanted to be at the center of an alien kingdom's future, but now he had no choice. He could see the divisions forming, the cracks in the foundation of the royal family. He knew that if something wasn't done soon, war could break out, not with weapons, but with broken trust and shattered alliances. Princess Seraphina approached him again, her eyes filled with worry. "My father is troubled," she admitted. "He does not show it, but I can see it." Marcus nodded. "Then maybe now is the time to talk. Not as a ruler and a subject, but as people who want the same thing, a future that doesn't have to be built on force." Seraphina hesitated, then gave a small nod. As the sun set over the empire, a decision had to be made. Would King Velexian listen to reason, or would his stubbornness lead to the downfall of everything he had built? Time was running out. The grand hall was filled with tension. Nobles, advisors, and warriors stood in silence, waiting. The king had called for a final gathering, a moment where his word would be law. But this time, not everyone was willing to obey. Princess Ariella and Princess Vailora stood at the front, their expressions firm. Behind them, several princesses, nobles, and guards who supported their cause stood in quiet defiance. Across the room, King Velexian sat on his throne, his face unreadable. Marcus stood nearby, observing everything, knowing that this moment could decide the future of the empire. Ariella took a step forward and bowed slightly out of respect, but her voice was strong when she spoke. "Father, we cannot obey your decree." Gasps echoed through the hall. No one had ever dared to openly defy the king like this before. The king narrowed his eyes. "You forget your place, Ariella." Vailora stepped forward next. "We have not forgotten. But you ask us to surrender our freedom, our right to choose. We cannot accept that." The king's expression darkened. "This is not just about marriage. This is about the future of our people. The human offers strength, a new path for our empire." Ariella shook her head. "Then let the future be built with choice, not force." The tension grew thicker. The royal guards, standing at the edges of the hall, looked at each other, uncertain. Would they have to fight their own princesses? Marcus took a deep breath and stepped forward. All eyes turned to him. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice calm. "I understand why you made this decision. You want your people to grow, to survive in a changing galaxy. I respect that. But forcing your daughters into a marriage they do not want will not make your empire stronger. It will divide it." The king's gaze locked onto Marcus. "And what would you suggest, human?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, then spoke firmly. Let them choose. Let them decide their own futures. If any of them wish to know me, I will not turn them away. But if they do not, then I will leave this place without complaint." A long silence filled the room. The princesses exchanged glances. Some of them, like Lyra and Seraphina, looked at Marcus with interest, while others, like Ariella and Valora, remained firm in their resistance. Finally, the king leaned back in his throne. He looked at his daughters, at the nobles, at Marcus. He saw the fire in their eyes, the same fire that had burned in his own heart when he was young. With a heavy sigh, he spoke. "Very well. You may choose your own fates." A wave of relief washed over the room. Some princesses smiled, others sighed in quiet victory. The rebellion had not turned into war. Instead, a new path had been forged, one where the future was decided by choice, not by command. But for Marcus, the journey was far from over. The tension in the grand hall slowly faded, replaced by quiet murmurs. The king's decree had changed. His daughters were now free to choose their own future. Some princesses looked relieved, while others remained uncertain about what would come next. The rebellion had not turned into war, but the kingdom was forever changed. Marcus stood among them, feeling the weight of the moment. He had never expected to be caught in the middle of an alien empire's struggles. He had come here as an outsider, chosen by fate, yet now he had become something more, a symbol of change. Ariella, the fiercest of the princesses, stepped forward. She looked at Marcus with sharp eyes. "You stood before my father and spoke with reason instead of force. That is rare in a warrior." Marcus nodded, meeting her gaze. "I wasn't here to take anything from you. I just wanted to do what was right." She studied him for a moment before giving a small nod of respect. Then, without another word, she turned and left. She had no interest in marriage, but she had gained something else. A newfound respect for the human who had challenged her father's rule with words instead of weapons. Lyra, the scholar, was next to approach. "I have read about humans, but meeting one is different. Your kind is unpredictable." Marcus smiled slightly. "I've heard that before." She hesitated, then asked, "Would you stay? Teach me about your world." Marcus considered her words. He had planned to leave if none of the princesses wanted him, but Lyra's curiosity was genuine. She did not see him as a ruler, a warrior, or a threat. She saw him as a source of knowledge, a way to understand something beyond her world. Seraphina stepped beside her sister. "You are different from what I expected," she admitted. "You did not come here with demands, nor did you try to force your way into our lives. That is rare among rulers." Marcus sighed. "That's because I'm not a ruler." Seraphina gave a soft smile. "Perhaps that is why you were the right choice." Meanwhile, in the shadows, some nobles and advisors whispered in frustration. The king had given in, and now the empire was on a path no one had foreseen. There were those who believed the human should never have been allowed to stay, but none dared to challenge the king's decision. As the night deepened, the palace grew quiet. Marcus stood on one of the high balconies, looking out at the alien sky. He had been given a choice. He could stay and explore this new world, or he could return to Earth and leave it all behind. Behind him, footsteps approached. "What will you do now?" Lyra asked. Marcus took a deep breath. "I don't know yet, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a choice." And that, he realized, was what truly mattered. The sun rose over the empire, casting golden light over the grand palace. The air felt different, lighter, freer. The king's decree had changed, and the future now belonged to those who had fought for it. Marcus stood on the palace balcony, looking out at the vast alien city below. He had come here as an outsider, but now he was something more. He was not a ruler, not a warrior, but a symbol of change. The princesses had won their right to choose, and the empire had taken its first step toward a future built on freedom rather than control. King Velexian had remained quiet since the confrontation. He had spent the night in deep thought, questioning his own decisions. Now, as he walked toward Marcus, there was no anger in his eyes, only understanding. "You spoke with wisdom," the king said, "more than I expected from a human." Marcus turned to face him. "I didn't come here to change your world, Your Majesty. I just wanted to make sure no one was forced into something they didn't want." The king gave a small nod. "Perhaps that is why the change was necessary." He sighed, looking toward the horizon. "For centuries, we have ruled with tradition, believing it to be our strength. But sometimes, strength is knowing when to let go." Meanwhile, the princesses embraced their newfound freedom in different ways. Ariella, the warrior, had no interest in marriage. She had other dreams: to train, to lead, to prove herself on the battlefield. With her father's blessing, she prepared to leave the palace and join the imperial forces, determined to carve her own path. Valora, the ambitious one, saw this as an opportunity to shape the future. Without the chains of arranged marriage, she could focus on politics, becoming a powerful voice in the empire's court. Lyara, the scholar, remained in the palace. She wished to learn more about Marcus, to understand human knowledge and culture. "Your world is strange," she told him, "and I wish to understand it." Seraphina, the kind-hearted one, was the only princess who truly saw Marcus as more than just a political tool. She had spent time with him, listened to his thoughts, and found something in him that she admired. "If you choose to stay," she said, "perhaps you will find a home here." Marcus smiled. He had a choice now: stay and be part of this new era, or return to Earth and leave it all behind. He had spent his whole life surviving, adapting, and fighting for what was right. Now he had something he had never truly had before: a place where he belonged. Looking at the princesses, the king, and the world that had once seen him as a stranger, Marcus finally spoke. "I think I'll stay for a while." And with that, a new chapter for both him and the empire began, one built on freedom, understanding, and the power of choice.